There was an interesting phrase from Prince Harry in court yesterday where he said that there is hard evidence to suggest an incredible amount of suspiciousness. Now, many of you would be forgiven for thinking that suspiciousness is not proof that anything happened and is certainly not evidence that anything happened. But it's not quite as simple as that. As Harry told the court yesterday that he only thought about taking legal action after a chance meeting with David Sherborne in France. And as he said, he wanted to significantly change the landscape by saying that he wanted to see if there's a way to find a different course of action rather than relying on the institution's way, meaning, of course, the setup for the royal family. Now, referring to what he said about evidence to suggest an incredible amount of suspiciousness, what we need to think about is the balance of probabilities and the standard of proof with which the court is going to decide this case. Because if there are taken together a whole number of different stories, which is what's happened here, they've been taken through 33 stories out of, I think, 147, to talk about where this information came from and how they would have got hold of this information, and that they would not have had that information but for methods of gathering that information which they say was unlawful. If you want to see some of the digest of some of those stories from today's video, I'll link that in the description below. It's over a 2-hour and 40-minute live stream where Mr. Robert Shaw and I discussed some of these stories live as they came out and reported by Sky News, and we comment on those and the patterns that are emerging about these stories. Because on the face of it, just being suspicious about something is not evidence that it happened. And it's certainly not evidence that it's happened. And sometimes, as Mr. Robert Shaw put it, a lack of evidence is not evidence that a thing happened, but sometimes it could be. So a lack of evidence can be evidence in itself, except when it's not.
What's been very interesting about this case is it's been very what we call forensic. Forensic just means pertaining to evidence, but when we use it in this context, what I mean is some lawyers are very broad brush. I do that. I'm very much a minimalist. I try to get one simple point and just say, look, you don't need to look at the detail. Does it pass the sniff test, as we say? But what's been very interesting is both Green and Sherborne, they're very, very forensic. They are literally going through line by line by line. So it's like I'm going through your statement and your statement of, your particulars of claim, and I'm addressing every single point, and then I'm cross-referencing it to other material. And it's been quite devastating, I think, because, we were saying on the other video that Green's gone in there with a very, very gentle, teasing out the evidence approach. And he's using incontrovertible evidence to basically put Harry in a difficult position.
And so you can look at this in a number of different ways. But when we look at these stories as a whole and taken together, if each and every one of them followed this pattern of here's the story, here are the intricate details that they would not have known, and yet somehow they did know, and they wouldn't have known but for various methods of gathering, and yet they hit the press anyway. No one else would have known these details. Ergo, the only way they could have had them was by some form of unlawful gathering. Now, the counter-argument to that, of course, is MGN have said that all of the information they gathered was either already in the public domain from other news sources, or it came directly from the palace themselves, or potentially there are other methods and other ways that they could have gathered this information anyway. One bit of information that might jump out as being a bit strange was when Prince Harry said that it was very suspicious that they had Chelsea Davies' phone number. And he said he didn't believe that she would have given the Mirror Group or any journalist her phone number. And also told the court that he once found a tracking device on her car, reporting on what had been described as a make or break holiday. Now, taking that information by itself, just her phone number, well, surely a number of people might have had her phone number. Maybe somebody would have been happy to sell that information in the form of her phone number to a journalist. Doubtless, journalists might have approached people for that information, and they might have been happy to give it to them. Does that make it unlawful? Not necessarily. Unethical, perhaps. And there are, of course, various codes of practice in the way that this information should be gathered. But in this case, Harry is saying that there is so many stories with so much information that all taken together gives rise to this whole air of suspicion that leads to the inevitable conclusion, he says, that there was unlawful information gathering going on. Miss Jane Kerr, on the other hand, who was a royal correspondent for 10 years, up to 2007, and wrote many articles under scrutiny, in her witness statement said she denied any voicemail hacking or using private investigators to carry out unlawful information gathering. And when asked about the use of private investigators, she told the court that she'd no reason to believe that the details for the stories had been obtained unlawfully. And these were people who were well known at the news desk and didn't think that there was anything wrong with using them. Of course, there are private investigators who go around to seek out information and things like this, and there are lawful methods and unlawful methods. And either way, the court is going to have to take all of these taken together on the balance of probabilities. Is it more likely than not that unlawful methods were used to gather this information? But it seems to me that it's going to be a difficult case for Harry to prove on the basis that it is largely made up of suspicions that arise out of the questions: how did they get this information? They must have got it in X, Y, or Z fashion to have obtained that information. But without any concrete proof that it happened, it's obviously difficult to prove that it happened. But that's where we come to the test and the balance of probabilities. This is not a criminal case, although it is going to be held to a high standard because the allegations are serious. They're allegations of an unlawful nature in the case to gather this information. So albeit on the balance of probabilities, not on the criminal standard, which is so that a jury is sure, or as it's commonly referred to as being beyond a reasonable doubt, it is not that standard. It is on the balance of probabilities. So the judge is going to have to decide in this case, on the balance of probabilities, is it more likely than not that these unlawful methods were used as alleged, or, as the news group say, that ordinary and lawful methods of gathering were used in respect of the information and the stories complained of. Harry gave evidence to the effect that he believes the information came from his voicemails. Now remember, this is his evidence because he was giving evidence in his witness statement and is being cross-examined on that witness statement. And he went on to say that even those that he trusted most, he ended up doubting, concluding to say that he believed that he'd been hacked on an industrial scale and he would feel injustice if he did not win this trial. So I just wanted to touch on that because there's been a lot of discussion about evidence versus lack of evidence versus suspicion and the standard of proof. And going back to previous videos, the feeling that Harry is somehow on trial here. And in a sense, it will feel that he is on trial, his allegations are on trial, but it is his claim to prove. So the starting point is that the burden is with him to prove his case and for the news group to defend it. So I hope you found that an interesting overview. Please check out our additional videos linked in a playlist in the description below. You can watch them one after another. Please also check out Art, Media and Law channel with myself and Alan Robertshaw, linked in the description below. And I'll come back with more thoughts as and when they pop up. Please remember to like the video and subscribe, ring the notification bell, and as always, thank you for watching.